When I was 10, I asked my mother why we didn't have a car like the other kids' parents. She looked up from the soup she was stirring, the same soup we'd had 3 nights that week, and smiled like it didn't matter. Because we walk slower, she said. We notice more beautiful things. It wasn't until years later that I realized she wasn't just teaching me patience. She was hiding something. Our house stood at the edge of Rosewood Lane, old and worn, its paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The neighbors whispered that it should have been torn down years ago. But inside, it smelled like cinnamon and warm bread, and I loved every creaky floorboard. To the world, we were poor. The kind of poor people cluck their tongues about in pity. My clothes were always secondhand, sometimes third. I never owned a backpack that didn't have someone else's name scratched out with black marker. School trips were dreams we couldn't afford, and birthday parties came with homemade gifts wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. But I never felt poor, not really. Not until I started to notice the way other kids looked at me, like I was something fragile, or worse, something shameful. Mom worked at the diner 3 blocks away. She took the early shift, the one no one else wanted, and came home smelling like grease and strong coffee. But even when her feet ached and her shoulders slumped, she always found a way to tuck me in with a story, usually about a knight who couldn't afford a sword but still found a way to save the world. At night, I'd sometimes hear her cry softly behind the bathroom door. I'd press my ear against the cold wood and wonder what monsters she was fighting when I wasn't looking. I thought I understood then. I thought her tears were just from exhaustion, from being a single mother doing it all alone. But the truth, I would later learn, was far more complicated. One afternoon in 7th grade, a charity truck pulled up in front of the school. Volunteers were handing out winter coats to kids in need. I stood at the back of the line, red in the face, while some of my classmates whispered and laughed. When I came home that day with a navy blue coat 2 sizes too big, Mom took one look at it, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to," she said softly. "I did," I whispered, ashamed. I was cold. She nodded and said nothing else. But that night, she didn't eat dinner. She said she wasn't hungry. I would later understand she had skipped dinner many times before, just not on nights when I'd notice. There was a quiet dignity to the way she lived. She never complained. She never begged, and she never, not once, let me feel the weight of the sacrifices she carried on her shoulders. But things started to change when I turned 15. That's when I began to wonder, how poor were we really? Because some things didn't add up. There were moments, little slips, that hinted at a secret she worked hard to bury. A strange phone call I overheard, a glimpse of expensive fabric in the back of her closet. And one day, when she didn't think I was watching, I saw her tear up a check and toss it into the trash. I didn't understand it then, but that moment was the first crack in the story she had so carefully built around us. The story that told the world we were barely getting by. The story she let everyone believe, including me, so I could grow up believing she had nothing to give, when in fact she had given me everything. By the time I turned 16, the questions I had buried for years began to claw their way to the surface. It started small. One morning, I found an envelope at the bottom of Mom's dresser drawer. One she clearly hadn't meant for me to see. Inside was a bank statement. My breath caught. There were 5 figures in the balance, numbers I had never seen in our home, not even imagined. We didn't even have a working toaster. Our refrigerator wheezed like it had asthma. And yet, that account held more money than our house was worth. I didn't confront her. I couldn't. I wasn't ready for the answer. But from that day on, I watched her differently. She still took the bus, still packed her lunches in brown paper bags and reused tea bags twice before throwing them out. But I began to notice the subtle signs of another life. A phone call she quickly ended when I walked into the room, the way she paused whenever we passed a certain building downtown. One evening, she came home late. I was pretending to sleep when I heard the door click. Through the crack in my door, I saw her wearing something I had never seen before. A navy dress, elegant and crisp, paired with shoes I knew cost more than a week of her wages. In her hand, she carried a clutch, not the frayed canvas purse I was used to, but a sleek black bag with gold trim. She slipped into her room quietly, unaware of my gaze. I lay in bed, heart pounding. Nothing made sense anymore. At school, I started working part-time at the library to save for college. I told Mom I didn't want to depend on scholarships alone, but the truth was, I wanted options, something in my control. That's when I discovered something else. One of my coworkers, a girl named Lena, told me she had seen my mother at the Symphony Gala last spring. "She was stunning," Lena said. "Everyone was talking about her. I thought she was a donor." I laughed, uncomfortable. You must have confused her with someone else. But deep down, I knew Lena hadn't. My mother was living a life in the shadows, a life she had deliberately kept from me. I began to dig. At first, it was innocent curiosity, but soon it became an obsession. I searched her drawers when she wasn't home. I checked old letters, scanned receipts, even searched our attic for clues. That's when I found the box. It was tucked behind an old trunk, covered in dust and tied with a blue ribbon. Inside were invitations, elegant, embossed, and addressed to her in a name I had never seen. Evelyn Rose Carrington. Not Evelyn Carter. Not Mom. Carrington. There were photos, too. One of her standing next to a man in a suit, smiling in front of a building that read, Carrington Holdings. Another of her in a courtroom, seated with a team of lawyers. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Who was she? And why had she hidden it all from me? The confrontation happened the next day. I waited until dinner. I didn't touch my food. Who is Evelyn Carrington? I asked. Her fork paused midair. Her eyes met mine. She didn't pretend not to know. She didn't deflect. Instead, she exhaled slowly, as though she had been carrying that question inside her for years, waiting for the day I'd ask it. She's the woman I used to be, she said, before you. She told me everything. How she was born into a wealthy family, raised with expectations stitched into every thread of her existence. How she was groomed to marry, to manage, to inherit. But then she got pregnant, with me, and everything changed. My father had left. Her family demanded she give me up. They said a child would ruin her reputation, cost her the legacy she was promised. She refused. So they cut her off. She walked away from the Carrington name with nothing but a newborn in her arms and a fire in her soul. I let the world think I had failed, she said. That I was poor. That I was broken. I let them believe I had nothing, so that you would grow up without the poison of that world. Tears blurred my vision. But why keep it from me? Why hide who you were? Because I didn't want you to feel like you were missing something. I wanted you to see value in people, not in things. To understand that dignity isn't wealth. And most of all, I wanted you to choose your life, not inherit mine. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be angry, but how could I be? She had given up everything for me. Not just comfort, not just money, her name, her future, her place in a world where she had once belonged, all so I could walk into my own, without their chains around my neck. The truth felt like a weight I wasn't sure I was ready to carry. Knowing my mother's sacrifice didn't make the years of struggle easier. It made everything more complicated. I started to see her differently. The tired hands that cooked dinner every night weren't just worn from work. They were worn from fighting a silent battle to protect me. But at the same time, I could feel the cracks that had been hidden beneath her brave smile. School became harder. Some days I couldn't focus because my mind was tangled in questions. How much had she really given up? How many nights did she go hungry so I wouldn't? Friends invited me to parties I never attended. I watched them drive off in cars I couldn't even dream of owning. I wanted to tell someone about my mother's story, but the words caught in my throat. How do you explain a secret so heavy it feels like betrayal? Then came the first real test. A scholarship opportunity appeared, one that could change my entire future, but it required financial disclosure. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the forms, the columns of numbers. Mom's secret bank account, the carefully hidden assets. If we reported them, I'd lose the scholarship. I looked at her, waiting for guidance. She smiled softly, but her eyes were tired. Let them think we're poor, she said quietly. Because this isn't just about money. It's about giving you a chance. I did what she asked. I lied, not because I wanted to, but because I knew it was her sacrifice in action again, a gift disguised as poverty. But secrets have a way of unraveling. One afternoon, the scholarship committee called. They had found discrepancies. My heart sank. I felt the noose tightening around both of us. The risk was bigger than I imagined. Mom stood firm, refusing to let fear break her spirit. She took on extra shifts at the diner, working herself to the bone so I could keep the scholarship and go to college. But the toll was visible. Dark circles under her eyes, her hands trembling from exhaustion. One night, I found her asleep on the kitchen floor, a half-empty coffee cup tipped over beside her. I knelt down and took her hand, afraid to wake her but desperate to connect. She squeezed my hand weakly, and I realized this fight was no longer just hers. It was ours. The strain reached a breaking point when my father's estranged family showed up, the Carringtons. They had tracked us down, demanding she return the family name, threatening to take me away. It was the nightmare she'd tried to shield me from. We locked ourselves inside the house at Rosewood Lane, the walls echoing with threats and old resentments. For the first time, I saw the fierce protector behind the gentle mother. She wasn't just poor or broken, she was a warrior. That night, as the storm raged outside, she told me, "Sometimes to give everything away, you have to lose it all first." Her sacrifices had been many, her battles endless. And now I had to decide, would I stand with her or walk away from the woman who had given me everything while letting the world think she had nothing? The tension in our little house was thick enough to cut with a knife, but something inside me shifted that stormy night. I realized that this fight was no longer just my mother's burden. It was ours to carry together. We faced the Carringtons with a courage neither of us knew we had. Their demands, their anger, their threats, they all echoed the pain of a past neither of us fully understood. I stood beside my mother in the cold, facing people who wanted to erase her history, to force me into a life shaped by their expectations, not mine. But Mom, with all her quiet strength, spoke her truth for the first time. I gave up everything because I believed in my daughter's future, not my past. Those words cracked the hard shells around their hearts more than I ever could have. Slowly, things began to change. My mother started to reclaim parts of herself she'd hidden for so long. She found work in a small art gallery, where she could finally use her talents she'd buried beneath years of survival. I started college, supported by the scholarship she fought to keep, a symbol of her sacrifice and my future. But the real healing came when we stopped pretending. We told the world who we really were. At first, it was terrifying. Old friends didn't know how to act. Neighbors whispered, but the story that once brought shame became a story of resilience, of a mother's fierce love that refused to be broken. I remember the day I introduced her to my professors and classmates, not as a poor waitress, but as Evelyn Rose Carrington, a woman who had given up a legacy so her daughter could write her own. Their eyes widened, but then with respect, they smiled. The scars of our past didn't vanish overnight. There were hard days, moments when the weight of years threatened to overwhelm us again. But together, we learned that truth, messy and painful, was better than any lie. I forgave her for the secrets because I understood why she kept them. She forgave herself for the choices she had to make because she knew they brought me here. Standing tall, ready to face the world with the courage she gave me. In the end, the poverty she let the world believe in wasn't the poverty of money. It was the poverty of pride she sacrificed for me. And in that sacrifice, I found a wealth beyond measure. Years later, as I stood at my college graduation, I looked out at the crowd and found her, my mother, Evelyn Rose Carrington, sitting quietly, her eyes shining with pride I had never seen before. The applause washed over me, but my mind was filled with the silent sacrifices that had brought me here. The sleepless nights, the whispered fears, the countless moments she let the world think she was poor, all so I could have a better life. Walking down the aisle, I felt the weight of her legacy, not the wealth of a name or a bank account, but the priceless inheritance of love, strength, and sacrifice. I remembered the day I first found that hidden box of memories, how it shattered everything I thought I knew, and yet, through the pain and confusion, it gave me something far greater, a deeper understanding of who she was, and who I was because of her. Later, we sat together in our small kitchen, the same kitchen where she had worked tirelessly to build a future for me. "I never wanted you to live my life," she said softly, her hand resting on mine. "I wanted you to live yours." I smiled, tears brimming in my eyes. "Because of you, I can." Her story, the story she hid so well, became a beacon for me. A reminder that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the sacrifices made out of love. And as I stepped forward into my own future, I knew that I carried her strength with me, a legacy that no one could take away. She let the world think she was poor, so I could have a better life. And in that choice, she gave me everything.